Let's check. See if I can find someone there. Could you just give us a thumbs up again if you can hear us before we spend an hour talking? And
to ourselves.
I can see a couple of people's thumbs,
Hey!
So that's good. Fantastic. Right.
Great. So we will get started. Firstly, welcome and thank you for joining us on our first adventure talk, hopefully one of many. For those of you who don't know us, we are Ash and Rich. We're a husband and wife team. We've spent many hours in a canoe together, some more painful than others. But we wanted to share with you some of our tales, hopefully to inspire some of you to go on some adventures or just, you know, get out and enjoy the outdoors. We are going to talk through various trips with you. We run a water sports and adventurous activities company ourselves, hence Canoe Trail. But we'll talk to you about all of the different trips this evening, and we'll jump back and forth between the two of us. The last bit from me is keep your eyes peeled, firstly for the dog that's going to be coming in and out. That's Fox, if you haven't met her before. She appears in some of our trips. But secondly, keep your eyes peeled for the Saint. If you go to the next slide.
Okay,
I sound like that man. Next slide, please. So this is us. And in the bottom right hand corner is the Saint. Now, to make sure you are awake and hopefully we haven't bored you to tears or to sleep, we're going to put the Saint in 10 of the slides.
It's actually 12. I can't count.
Oh, there you go. It's 12 slides. So keep your eyes peeled for him. He crops up all over the show. So firstly, I'm Ash, obviously the one on the horse. A little bit about me is I was a bit more of a country girl before I met Rich. Horses, dogs, and that kind of thing. Ironically, I tried to book on some of his paddling courses a couple of times, but they're always fully booked because he's so good. But eventually we did meet, and it kind of took off from there. And we'll fill you in on our first trip in a minute.
And I had paddled. I was very lucky to join a local kayak club, Viking Kayak Club, at the age of about 10, I think, and then did lots of adventures around the world where essentially somebody else fulfilled your dream, like jumping off a perfectly good platform attached to a piece of elastic. And this is one of my favorite stories because I was just so nervous trying to make small talk.
You look really retro then.
Yeah, a bit retro. That's why I've got the hat on, also because of lockdown hair. But the guy's like, you know, yeah, mate, where you from? Which is my New Zealand accent. I said, I'm from Bedford. And he said, oh, that's splendid. What I want you to do is look over there at the sheep on the hill and give us a big Bedford dive. And I shuffled to the edge really nervously. And the bloke said, yeah, mate, you might want to come back. We haven't attached the bungee. So that was my pretty short-lived bungeeing career. I did survive. But on to, as Ash said, our adventures together after we met and got married. So do you want to talk a little bit?
There.
Little clue, yeah.
So this was our first trip ever that we did together after just a couple of months of knowing each other. Rich said in his, you know, off the cuff way, just let's go on a little walk. It's not that far. And it turned out to be Hadrian's Wall, which was a bit further than I was hoping. I did complete the journey with him, although I did try and decide how I would lose him en route or just kill him with a piece of the wall. It turns out the longest walk I'd done was to the pub. We found out while walking and spending many hours in the rain talking together. But needless to say, this picture here, which is actually quite hard to see, but if you guess where that is, you get a special prize. It is Sycamore Gap, so famous for Robin Hood, and that's where he proposed. So a little moment there.
Moving on. Awkward. We think it's good, but anyway. I, just to say a bit more, I've done about 11,500 miles of human-powered adventure, and I would big them up, and magazine articles like the Hadrian's Wall one, and Ash was basically convinced I was literally popping off on holiday. So she had the bright idea that I couldn't always pop off, so why don't we do something called Project 24, where we paddle, walk, or do whatever it is for 24 hours. Sleeping doesn't count. So this was Ash's bright idea to walk the Pennine Way. Unfortunately, it corresponded with sort of 2 foot of snow. So it was a pretty tricky trip. So in terms of my ventures, just to sort of whet the appetite, it's gone from +40, +45, cycling the Sahara, which was a completely ridiculous idea, to -70, coldest place on the planet in the Yukon territories, trying to ski 500
Nice
miles.
frozen bogey
Yeah,
shot.
frozen bogies, lovely. Through to kayaking big waves off Casablanca on a London to Marrakesh trip. Spot the saint, there's the clue. Hopefully you're still awake. And some other prominent landmarks. Other landmarks are available, but this one was Niagara Falls to the Statue of Liberty with something called the spare seat, and that was quite a different adventure. Every day someone joined in the spare seat, and that was quite a fitting end to it. So as promised, enough of that intro and other small talk, moving on to Canada and some of the trips we've done there. The fairly poor use of arrows in red demonstrates. The bottom arrow is the Niagara Falls one, starting and finishing it in New York. But we've also then got Algonquin on Ontario Park, Manitoba, the bit in the middle, up near Hudson Bay, and then some fairly long journeys that started in Vancouver and ended up sort of far up in the Yukon territories and then back into Alaska. So hopefully that helps your geography, but Canada's absolutely a place that we have grown to love. So do you want to talk about your first Canada trip?
So this is us in Temagami. This was our first trip. We went, gosh, a few years ago now, and we went to meet some friends of ours out there, and we went to their cabin in Temagami, which was absolutely stunning. We then came back with some lovely customers of ours, which are now become friends, and we took them on an Algonquin Park and Temagami trip. So note the sporty outfit there. So this was a real classic canoe trip in Canada. It's full of portage points, which means you have to carry your boat and all your equipment. So this is second nature to the Canadians. It was a bit of a surprise for some of our guys, but everyone did really well. Some of the portage points were incredibly long. You know the longest one.
The longest one that we did on this trip was about 1.2 miles, but it's a bit like ski slopes, if you can think of sort of blue runs, green runs, right up to sort of Black Diamond or whatever. They get increasingly harder, and those are your sort of badges of honor that you look to have. And this picture here is taken at a point where I am almost in tears because I was wearing open-toed sandals and managed to boot a tree stump. So that was quite painful, really.
He already had a broken toe, but by the time he came out of the forest with the canoe on his head screaming, he'd broken it again. So I drew the short straw on this trip and had to carry, I think it was 2 out of the 7 boats on the longest portage point. So that was pretty hard going.
And small violins. There were small violins too.
There we go.
There you are. One of the great things about the sort of Canadian portage stuff is that a lot of the modern things are carbon Kevlar. So although we look suitably impressive, it's not quite as bad as it may seem.
It's not that heavy.
It's not that heavy. Canoe hat. These photos, we were there on the first trip as a press trip for something called Paddle Ontario and the Canadian canoe culture. And we were linked to things like the Canoe Museum in Peterborough. That's not Peterborough, England, Peterborough, Canada. And Steve Bruno, who was our host, I have to say these are his great photos. But one of the things that's so lovely about Algonquin is the lake and river systems and, of course, the wildlife. Some more wild than others. This does demonstrate the sort of motley crew of customers that choose to come with us, including I think one of those is a PhD professor in science and a High Court judge, and my brother. So you can work out which one's the most stupid looking one. That's my brother. So Tomogamy, as I said, was more heading towards the black slopes. I don't know if you want to explain a bit, Ash, about how you found Tomogamy and why it's such a special place.
Yeah, so Tomogamy is quite far north. It's about a 3-hour drive from Ontario, and it's absolutely stunning, really wild country. We were there, as you can tell from the picture, it's pretty warm. So we went in September and it was lovely and warm, missing the black fly, luckily, which was nice. And we got to spend about 5 nights tripping to the cabin in Tomogamy, so camping out each night unsupported, and we got flown in by float plane, which was awesome. It's always the highlight of one of the trips. Not sure what's happening with my arms there. It looks kind of like broken as I'm coming up the slope, but lots of portaging and carrying of kit, which is all part of it. Actually, I actually miss it when we come back to the UK and we do paddling, and there's not quite so much of that, but we've got one of those trips up our sleeve, so we'll tell you about that later.
And I mean, to explain a bit about Tomogamy, you can paddle in, and we took the float plane in. And for me, I had previously sea kayaked from Vancouver to Alaska on a 1,000-mile trip, and it was incredible because I was literally buzzed, and the float planes would pass me all the time, and I had this real sort of green with envy moment that I really wanted to be in one of these sort of old workhorses of the north. And then, of course, our dream came true. And we landed on a lake called Florence Lake with, I think it was 60 meters of visibility down. It was crystal clear, wasn't it?
Yeah, crystal clear water, the clearest water we've ever been in. And you just fill up your water bottle as you're paddling, and you can swim in it. It's beautiful.
So, as we said, we spent a few days journeying and eating like kings and queens on the trail, which I think is another thing that's really important to us. Obviously, in the world of television, a lot of things are depicted as you must eat the wrong end of a kangaroo or whatever, witchetty grub, whereas we're at the opposite end. We call that bad admin. And in general, eating well and enjoying the campfire traditions and the communion of the campfire is something that's really important. And of course, you then make it down to this cabin that our friends had built.
This picture here is the swimming pool. So the cabins, you can see the steps to the right hand side that you climb down to go swimming in, or your daily wash, whichever you prefer.
And they actually had a sauna, didn't they?
They did have it. Don't tell people that. It's roughing it. It was really hard.
So tough, so tough, yes.
But like Rich said, food becomes so much more important when you're on trips and expeditions. It becomes a bit like an obsession. It's the thing that you can't wait to get through the end of the day and have that little treat. So they are so important to pack the little treats and the odd tipple.
So just to prove that we can survive things in a boat together, closer to home when we hire craft, we always like, you know, you may or may not end up with a good relationship after paddling together, but most people seem to manage. And this is actually at the bottom of the waterfall, which is about 7 or 8 meters. And the plunge pool that you saw is at the top. So this is the bottom of the cabin falls, which are pretty spectacular. So more wildlife, moose country. And going on to this sort of portage route, what happens in Tomogamy is it's the ancient pine forests, red and white pines. And they were a big part of an environmental movement back in the sort of 60s, 70s to save them from clear-cut logging. And so now what happens is you have these narrow portage routes where you get out and you carry your kit, as Ash has already demonstrated. But these are definitely the black runs, aren't they? They were pretty tricky.
Yeah, this is not kind of your intro to paddling. You want to do a couple of trips before you do these. But these are definitely achievable by almost anyone. They're fantastic trips.
Well, it must be able because we've done it.
Oh, there's another classic Ash picture.
So this portage, I mean, this is actually a portage.
It doesn't
here.
look that steep.
It doesn't look steep, but this is sort of like that. And you walk along that narrow log, which is sort of wedged.
That's the improvement. The log's only been there for a couple of years, but you had to, this is one of the portage points that sheer rock, as Rich says, to get up. And then you have to walk along it without slipping back down. There's about 15, 20 meters sheer drop back into the river.
And this bit's easy because you've only got a bag. But
Yeah.
I mean, with a canoe, it's a bit more
We couldn't
tricky.
find the picture of me with the canoes. Oh no, that's not that. But this is to show you the portage points that we were talking about. So carrying the boat and all your equipment is part of it. In Algonquin, which was a bit earlier in the trip, it's a lot clearer. The paths are a lot clearer. They've all been worn nice and smooth or cleared by rangers, so it's lovely. This is a bit more remote, so we called them ankle snappers or leg breakers, because you would be putting your feet down in the holes between the rocks, hoping that you don't drop the canoe and bash it because you're in the middle of nowhere and you'd have to fix it, or secondly, drop any of the kit you're carrying. So yeah, it was a bit tricky, quite a workout.
Obviously, gaffer tape does fix it all.
Yeah,
but
we had a lot of gaffer tape.
Given that these are, I don't know, $3,000 carbon Kevlar foam core canoes,
we
don't want to break them. No. And as you said, it was really warm when we arrived on our first trip here. It was really an Indian summer there, wasn't it? It was Scorchio.
Really hot.
Spot the saint. If you're not awake.
Them.
Well, all right. So this was, it became a swimming trip, and we actually wrote a couple of articles for Outdoor Swimming magazine about finding your kind of extreme swim. But you could literally jump off the cliff there into sort of deep, cool pools, and you can imagine if you've been sort of sweating hiking the trails, it was just a welcome, refreshing dip, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was lovely. Where the saint is about where you jumped, isn't it?
I think so. And this is the plunge pool at the top of Cabin Falls.
Can I just cover up on this picture?
You should cover up.
I do have clothes on every time. I think this is on the front of a magazine. I do have clothes on.
What magazine was that? Strange.
But yeah, like Rich said, because it was an Indian summer, it did become a bit of a swimming trip. And as an outdoor wild swimmer, I love getting in water pretty much any time of the year. So this was a real blessing. And what better way, canoeing and swimming, perfect marriage.
There was one thing though that obviously when we ended up swimming at one of the pools further up, Shangri-La, wasn't it, where the little crayfish were biting my toes.
Yeah, that wasn't very nice.
I was literally running for my dear life. So I'm going to take over for a little bit and talk about a different kind of canoe trip, one on the mighty Yukon River.
How many times have you done that?
I have been to the Yukon 8 times, sadly not with my wife, so this is the awkward part of the talk. And
I'm at home running the business.
Yeah. But my first trip was to arrive and canoe the Yukon from Whitehorse down to Circle in Alaska. And it was an absolutely incredible moment, a defining moment, I would say, of finding peace in such a spiritual and huge place. This is us about to ferry glide back across Five Finger Rapids and go over to what is effectively River Left. And I'll do a quick plug for, if you have a look on our YouTube channel, there's a YouTube video of us racing the Yukon in 58 hours or 59 hours, 36 minutes or something. And in that, we nearly swim here in a racing canoe, so a much narrower canoe hitting the Five Finger Rapids. And one of the great things, and what's always guaranteed on the Yukon, is the history, but what's usually there is the wildlife. So I think that's one of the reasons that people are drawn to this extraordinary place. And off the top of my head, 35,000 people live there. It's 4 times the size of Britain. So canoeing with wolves, obviously wolves don't canoe. And like I said, this sort of living history, like Indiana Jones or Dora the Explorer. And this is Rob, one of our instructors, in front of the SS Evelyn Norcom, a giant paddle steamer that was taken out in about 1916. And you can camp literally on the island here. The islands was a shipyard called Hootalinqua. And that's the sort of stuff that absolutely, pardon the pun, floats my boat. Slightly bigger wild animals. So obviously in Algonquin, black bears, but in the Yukon, grizzlies as well. Team of people. So the first time I did it was with a very small team, and then since then we've done it with our partners at Woodland Ways, fantastic bushcraft company who we work very closely with, and then with another rabble another team that joined us. I believe that a couple of them might be on the call tonight, so probably shouldn't be too rude about them. But it's just this incredible, vast land. And if you don't know about it, then read some of the books, Call of the Wild, that sort of thing. Jack London and Robert Service poetry. The last trip we did there, one of our coaches, he was a customer, but now he's a coach. Adam got within about 15 meters of this lynx who just sat there and let us. It was like the Keystone Cops. There was sort of 11 of us. In fact, the only one who wasn't there was the founder of the bushcraft company, which we were then didn't know whether to tell him that we'd had sort of 10 or 15 minutes this close to a lynx. But it was incredible. And in the end, it literally got up and sauntered off and was not too bothered by us at all. Of course, the big thing is getting to Dawson City and the Wild West sort of town and Diamond Tooth Gertie's and I'm trying to think of the name of the other hotels, the Westminster, and fairly sort of floorboards and muddy streets, and it can be pretty wild, but it's incredible. Clearly, you need to know your boundaries and make sure you get your parking right. But it's just this incredible destination to get to, and usually that's the end of our trips. We tend to paddle down to Dawson City and then call it a day. So just to explain, I'd done the Yukon trip. That was 700 miles, done 1,000 miles of the Inside Passage, and that left this little gap between about 250 miles, which was the Chilkoot Trail. You may have seen that on BBC One. Was a kind of filmed project. And I think this is a real shot of perspective when we talked earlier on about portaging and the grand portage of the sort of east side on the west side of Canada. When you were hiking these trails, you needed 1 ton of supplies. So probably you had to go up and down this avalanche strewn route about 30 times to be allowed into Canada from Alaska. So just incredible hardships that our forefathers and foremothers, is that the right word?
It'll work.
It'll work, yeah. So anyway, we popped up to Skagway, 100-mile sea kayak, arrived. I love this picture of the juxtaposition of a giant cruise liner with my little kayak, and then hiked over the Chilkoot Trail with a 1-man packer raft. And I can totally recommend this trip. I would probably say don't take the packer raft. Just take it easy, a bit easier than we did anyway. And then we got into these packer rafts and paddled 100 miles, which was probably my worst ever piece of expedition planning, given there was no flow. That's my long-suffering brother.
Like paddling a bathtub.
Yeah, it's like paddling a jelly bathtub. So we're going to talk probably about the biggest and most difficult trip that we've done.
Yeah.
The most challenging.
Well, we didn't find it as challenging, did we?
Well,
it wasn't too bad, but yeah, it's the most remote paddling trip that we've ever done. This is the North Seal River, and the trip that we were asked to undertake was paddling the North Seal River so that it could be mapped. So unbelievably, there's still places in Canada not mapped, and this was one of them. As far as we know, it was the second descent. I think there was talk of a few guys paddling it about
in the 80s,
10,
I think. Well,
no, I think it was early noughties. So about 10 or 15 years before we did. But it was very, very limited. It was a lot of looking on Google Maps, literally to look at rapids on Google Maps and go, oh, you could run it maybe this side. So we were flown in, so we were 300 miles from the nearest town, about 100 miles from the nearest road. And to get to the top of this, which shouldn't look like that, we were expecting a big bouncy load of rapids. We got there and it was like a rock garden, and we spent the whole day moving rocks. These boats were, what were these called?
Pack canoes.
Pack canoes, that's it.
Pack boats.
It's like a kind of almost like a canvas, so you can't be pushing them over rocks like you can with a more of a plastic tub boat. And actually almost at the end of this we tore ours, so we thought we had patched it, But unfortunately, on the next set of rapids, we realized we were filling with water. So we were literally bailing out, and then we'd be like, right, we've got to go, and then paddle the next set until we could pull over. But it was all good fun.
I mean, I think, again, just to distinguish between things that you might have watched on television or whatever, where potentially there's a safety crew or whatever it is.
This is unsupported.
So
I should have mentioned
this
that.
is unsupported. And I think the other thing is that I would estimate that we all fell over about half a dozen times between the rocks.
Yeah. And they were really sharp, weren't they?
Yeah, so you're sort of stumbling with fully laden canoes trying to make a new channel. In fact, our friends there are moving rocks so that we can try and sort of float the pack canoes, the pack boats through the gap. And the pack boats were a sort of skin on frame, so they've got an aluminium frame and then this canvas cover. So that you will hear later on presented other kind of problems. I think we managed, was it 3 miles in 5 hours?
Yeah.
A lot of black flies as well, so we were kind of getting eaten alive.
This time we hit the black fly time. You can see there we're wearing dry suits. We found this really alien that our friends didn't wear dry suits, and I really felt for them because although it looks sunny in the picture, the water was freezing. This trip had been pushed as far back in the season as possible, just because of work commitments and various other things. So this was the last window that we dared take before it all froze over. And this was probably the last sunny day. It's the one and only sunny day, day one. And it got colder and colder as we paddled. It was usually -6 paddling during the day. So it was really, really cold. And the water was starting to thicken. So as you're paddling, before it freezes, it kind of goes more viscous and thick. It was a really unusual experience. So we were quite keen to get miles under our belts and get that trip done, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's that, doing a ski expedition is one thing, doing a paddling expedition is another, but when the two things are kind of colliding, it becomes, becomes
you don't
difficult.
want them to collide.
And one of the things that's incredible about this particular part of the boreal forest region is just the sort of stunning geological deposits that have been left, giant erratics, which we would always chuckle about and go, erotics. But these giant rocks, and some of them were the size of a bus. And of course, they were glacial deposits. And right through to these bits that we didn't really know about until we got there, called eskers. And is this the Robertson?
Yeah,
esker?
This is the Robertson.
So this is, I think, the longest esker in the world. It's a big sandbar, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's sand and gravel deposits. So you can probably see at the back of the picture, this is really, really flat country. So we were used to a lot more mountains and what have you in Canada, but when we flew north, it was really flat. So these eskers, these gravel banks that we would find, and the erratics were actually really exciting because you've been looking at flat landscapes for weeks, and then you suddenly find one and be really excited.
And I think it's important to reference on all of our Canadian trips, we've been quite connected around the sort of indigenous people. And the people of this region were the Dene people, and they would hunt using the eskers following the caribou migration. So they weren't really in the same way.
They weren't
canoe people in the same way. They would go across the gaps of water rather than do big canoe journeys with birch bark or anything. So if you can imagine that we're going between lake systems, so there would be a bit of a slog across the lake, sometimes windy, sometimes not. That's the luck of the draw.
Sometimes blizzards coming in, sometimes not.
Yeah, luck of the draw. And then you would get to these sort of grade 2, grade 3 sections of rapids. And, they were pretty big bits of water. And this one, I think, is a lake called Sandy Lake. And this is the point at which we've camped after that first day of going through the sort of
rock garden,
the baptism of fire. And we walked up onto the esker. We could see this, got back in the boats, paddled across here. And I looked down, and as Ash said, we realized we'd sprung a leak when I was sort of sat in about a foot of water. And we emptied it and then went to go again. And we thought we'd fixed it. So it's a bit like a giant puncture repair kit. And we ended up doing sort of read, run and bail on these rapids, trying to pick a line with a boat that was becoming increasingly sluggish and full of water. So that was definitely a challenge. This doesn't look that big. These are at the bottom end of a set of grade 2 probably, but where it was tight, you would get some quite big waves. And you can see we've got spray skirts on the canoes, and we're being pretty careful. As Ash said, the water, you wouldn't have lasted that long in this water. I mean, obviously we were in a dry season.
I didn't swim in this water.
No swimming.
No swimming. So this was one of the days that we were paddling pretty hard, but we could see that there was a big blizzard cloud following us. And as you can see, because it's so flat, you can see them from really far away, and it was enormous. And I don't think we've ever paddled so hard or for so long to make it into land, because there was little points that we knew we had to make. Because we knew that would be a better place for a campsite and what have you. So it was a bit of a race against the weather to get into this site. So we were pretty excited when we got in there. However, we were pretty tired. Do you want to tell the story of the tent?
Is this about the bear?
Yeah.
I'm not too worried about the bear, to be honest. But I mean, we had a gun, right? And we had bear bangers and we had other things.
So we were so tired when we got in here, we literally chucked the tent up, and Rich was like, are you sure you want to put it here? And I'm like, yeah, here's fine. And we were on a little path, and we really didn't think, because we were so tired, what had made the path. And I was woken up in the night by something snuffling around the tent, and I just knew it was a bear, and I just lay there for ages, just listening out and waiting, and adrenaline's going. Eventually fell back to sleep, and when we woke up in the morning, our friends were like, wow, have you seen all the bear prints? Because it had snowed in the morning and you could see the bear prints, and it was all around our tent. They had gone and looked, well, she had gone and looked at the boat. It had been all around the campfire and what have you. So yeah, that was a bit scary.
And strangely, it snores really loudly, that bear. Who knew?
Rich did not wake up.
I did not. There's no need. One of the things that began to happen was we were treated to these incredible sunsets and northern lights and so on. You'll see here that we have rafted up the canoes, part of a kind of de-risking strategy. And that was mainly, I think it was about a force 5, wasn't it? Or something. We had quite big waves on the lakes, and again, the sort of idea of dumping into the water there just didn't really seem that appealing. To be perfectly honest. I mean, do I need to say anymore?
Yeah, we were treated to light shows, the Northern Lights.
Most nights. It got a bit boring.
No, we were really excited. Our friends, obviously, being from Canada, found this, quite boring because they'd seen it so many times. But we would stay up for hours looking at these. Almost every night we were treated to these incredible light shows.
I think that's just the whiskey evaporating, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, as Ash said, and I think it's really interesting on a paddling trip of this nature as things begin to get cooler and colder. And it's probably the only time that I've ever, although I've paddled around glaciers and other things, where the water's begun to thicken. And that was quite off-putting, wasn't it?
Yeah, like I say, early on in the trip, it was sunny for that one day, but pretty quickly, especially getting out onto these lakes, and each evening you'd hear the call of these snow geese, and there'd be these beautiful like pink ribbons so high up, and our friends are saying when the snow geese are leaving, it's really time for you to go. So that equally heightened everything.
Yeah, it was cold, I'm not gonna lie.
It was a bit chilly.
It was beautiful, and the loons.
Yeah, stunning.
Yeah. So one of the
that's a good picture.
One of the things that amused me about this trip, I was so amused. I was sat in the back, as was the other other friend of ours, and the two girls were sat in the front, mainly because we were heavier and that worked better for trimming the boats. But literally, they were the ones that got the full force of the sort of grade 3, possibly 4 on the, I think there's about 14
kilometers
of solid
solid rapids,
and
it was awesome.
It was really good fun. We actually because it was much narrower, much faster, bigger waves, we actually kept the boats rafted together for that. And again,
which
that was
creates a perfect funnel for the water to go right up and over the people in the bow.
Yeah, it's all right in the back actually.
Yeah, is it?
Turns out to be all right. And there is some video that we will edit. We'll have to
take out
the swearing as we literally hit some pretty big water and pretty big waves. So we're approaching the sort of end point onto a massive lake called Shatani Lake, and that was, if you like, the pickup point from the float plane that would come and get us. And one of the things that we were really, really excited about was the history that we were then linking into of this map drawn in the 1700s by Samuel Hearn, who was a factor of the Hudson Bay Company. And they had arrived on the same lake and made camp, and we were going to camp in exactly the same place. And there was a real sort of serendipity about being in that kind of place, and quite a sort of spiritual feeling, really. And yeah, there we go. And at the bottom is where we camped, but right behind us was a drumlinoid, a massive pyramid of these rocks that had been moved as a glacial deposit. And I can imagine Samuel Hearn, who was actually equipped with many women. He had concubines. I just had the one. But as you arrive on this giant lake and then you see this sort of strange pyramid in the distance, which was rock, you can imagine why you'd be drawn to go and have a look and be sort of curious about what was there. So again, there was this sense that maybe we were walking in footsteps of our forefathers and so on. So the Robertson Esker, we wandered around it. It snaked around. I'm pretty sure this wasn't the same Esker. I can't remember now. But anyway, we found
more bones as we were walking, and then we found these.
So the wolf den, and that was quite exciting. We sort of tracked them back to their den. We had found quite a lot of scat and, as Ash said, bones.
Lots of bones.
But, it was nice. We were walking around. We've kind of done with the paddling. We've disassembled our pack boats, and we're waiting for pickup. As I said, bit of scat, a few berries. We did the obligatory, here's us with the Remington pump action shotgun, bear defense. And the funny story about all of this is that 2 weeks in, we thought we'd give it a test fire and discovered that the breech loading mechanism wasn't actually working. So it wouldn't put a round into the barrel. That's not to say you couldn't load one manually, but I just had this vision of like, excuse me a minute, just wait there.
We just had to run faster than our friends.
Yeah,
that's what
that was
we decided.
Bear defenses and all that. Bit of washing, getting ready for the pickup. Yeah, there wasn't much drying going on, was there? And as we said, even though this is sort of 2 weeks into the trip, there's no need to slum it. So we got the reflector oven and making sure we're eating the right things.
Looks like we're baking bread in there.
Yeah, I think so.
Very nice.
And because we were getting picked up, we had surplus. We bushed a bit of food ready in the morning. We'd been on the sat phone, which was a little bit squawky for the pickup. And bingo, Bob's your uncle and all that stuff. Here's the plane ready to pick up.
So close.
It's really close, isn't it? Do you want to tell them what happened?
It flew away. So the pilot hit a rock as he came in, and I was closest to him. He threw open the door, shouted something which I couldn't hear what he was saying, but it probably wasn't very nice, and then he just flew off. Everyone else in the group was really confident that he was rounding to come back, and I was like, no, that's a straight line. So he flew 100 miles back to base and just left us there.
And he wasn't keen to come back, was he?
Wasn't keen.
There was no negotiating.
He was not coming back
with the man on the end of the phone. So at this point, things were looking a little bit more challenging. I think that's the way we describe it. For a number of reasons. There was one plane out of the region about 24 hours later. maybe it was 36 hours. Anyway, and we obviously had to at some point go home. We were also worried that we'd now at this point disassembled, which is in the bottom of the picture here, the cloth around the boats and the skin on frame. And
because it was cold, it had gone brittle, so you couldn't put the boats back together either.
So it was a bit like a naughty Tupperware, and the wind had picked up onto this shore. And so the worry was when we got on the sat phone, the sort of base was like, well, if you paddle to the other shore, that would be great, which was, as you can see, a couple of miles away. And we're like, well, yeah, we haven't got anything to paddle. They're in bits and, you know, no chance of putting them back together. So we then had this slightly amusing ongoing dialogue with the base. And we would say, you know, what's the weather like? Yeah, the weather's great here. And we were imagining them sat in the bar, all warm. We're now freezing. It's snowing all the time. And
we did get to meet the wolves. They came to see us that night, the night that we were supposed to be nice and warm and all excited about having a bath and a drink and, you know, nice things. So we were having dinner and they had wandered back down to where our camp was and were howling just behind the trees, which was really cool, actually.
Yeah, and so there was a bit of a touch and go moment of who will come and get us, will anyone come and get us, what will happen next, watch this sort of space. And as someone who's done, you know, like I said, a fair few miles, you of course see the headlines of, you know, moron adventurers rescued, even though we'd like to point out it wasn't our fault. So things were getting a bit sketchy. And in the end, they'd put out a call to see if any other bush planes could come and get us. This is our tarp out as a rescue signal. We were back onto sat phones trying to organise things, getting told regularly that don't worry from the base. You know, I'm a logistics man. I've got this. And eventually, was he called Brian?
He is, yeah.
So Brian
from Leicester.
Of
all places.
A British pilot said, yeah, don't worry, I'll come in. So he came on the other side of the spit, landed, no worries. We were back to base, and it was aborted in the sense of needing more serious rescues, which was quite reassuring.
Phew.
So just to sort of finish off a little bit, that's some of the more extreme stuff. This is closer to home. So when lockdown ends and people can get out, then do come and see us. We're in Bedford. We run stuff in Scotland. If we can't get out of the country, then this is on the Spey and on the washing machine. So feel free to come and find out more, or just come and chat to us. We don't bite. This is the secret lock.
Oopsie.
And yeah, just wild camping on the locks in Scotland. Pretty epic. And closer to home, we have our own private woodland, and we're very proud that that was voted top 52 things to do in the world by Lonely Planet. So Bedford or New York, I think it says.
We're number 42.
42, yeah. Well, we'll take that. So coming up next, there we go. Save the date. I don't mean next as in next. We'll hopefully take some questions if there are any, and if people are still awake.
Oh yeah, feel free to put questions in the chat and we will grab a few out of there in a sec.
Yeah, so save the date coming up in 2 weeks. Helen Reeves, one of our very good friends, Olympic medalist, only female to medal in the Olympics from Britain. And then we'll have some more. We've got, gold medalists. We've got adventurers. We've got all sorts of people that have agreed to talk. If you've enjoyed it, definitely tell your friends. Let's see if I can make that happen. Oh, yeah, there we go. Walking the dogs.
I like what you did with the saints.
Did you like that? Yeah, the saints in the canoe. We will take some questions in case you're going to leave right now. Then there are videos of some of the bits and bobs on our YouTube channel. Please like and subscribe. Please follow us on Facebook. This is the shameless. Please follow us. We're not too needy. If you've really enjoyed it, then write us a review. If you haven't, message us and we'll try and make it better.
We'll try and be funnier.
We'll try and be funnier, yeah.
But thank you so much for spending your evening with us. And like I say, put any questions you have in the chat and we'll have a look now.
And for those that have known me for a long time, I usually was really bad at timekeeping, but that's smack on.
It's pretty good.
It's pretty good, yeah. So we're going to try and unmute Gideon, our assistant, and see if he's got some questions rounded up. So let's see if we can do that. Right, hold on. Where are we? Gideon, where are you?
There he is.
Gideon, asked to unmute. Is that going to work? Oh, there we go. Kids, can you unmute?
Mute.
Don't know. Let's stop
Hello?
for a minute.
There is everybody.
Right. Let's see if we can find some questions if there are any. Well, thank you very much, everybody, indeed. Where's the chat? Chat. Wow. Right. So I'm reading some here. Great to be reminded that adventures will happen again. Well, hopefully.
They will. We promise.
Well, you can't promise that.
We will be allowed out one day.
So how much time do you spend on your planning processes and risk assessments? So
that's a good one.
That is a really good one. So historically, I used to think of the most ridiculous ideas that I could, like cycling the Sahara. And then my friends sort of said, if you keep planning like this, we're not coming. So as I developed into some form of adult, I have realized that I should probably be a bit more careful about the planning. So we do a huge amount around dynamic risk assessment, and then planning, and in particular things like scenarios. What happens if? How do we get out? We have a lot of communications kit, so satellite phones, spot trackers, right through to the Garmin InReach, so we can message, we can find ways to get extracted from these things.
And like we said earlier, using Google Maps is actually pretty good. I mean, we paddled the North Sea using Google Maps.
Okay, so there's a question here about someone who's done expeds in Sweden, Norway and the Highlands. There are some definitely tough portage trips there. What would you say are the key considerations for Canada or the Yukon? I mean, I think hopefully in the course of our talk, we have demonstrated that the terrain is quite different. I mean, the Yukon is just a very big, fast conveyor belt. And if you've got a little bit of paddling skill, the Five Fingers is nothing at all to worry about. If you've got a bit more paddling skill, it's somewhere that's great to play. I think when you look more on the east side, then you've got more traditional portages and journeys.
And you don't have the grizzly bear, which, helps you sleep at night when he's not nearby.
Craig Saffin, when's the next Yukon trip? He works with us, so he's not allowed. Wraps with peanut butter, Lauren Jarvis. What, no wraps? Oh, you people. So in terms of food things, that's an interesting bit to talk about. When we did the second trip to the Yukon with customers, there was a look of horror that there wouldn't be any meat. And there was a real concern about this. And in fact, there's a one stock up sort of place at Carmack, so you can grab resupply there. So there's a couple of days where you can have meat, but other than that, it was a very vegetarian diet. But the look of fear on some of the lads' faces. And the other bit that became a standing joke was about the wraps, and wraps are great for feeding the troops.
They're already flat.
Yeah, they
don't go off.
They've got a lot of
oil
in them.
Really useful.
So Peter has asked, where are the canoes on the plane? So two different things. The one where we go into Tomogamy, then the canoes are strapped. They're nested on the wings and tied on.
You can put one inside the other. So if you get like a 17-foot and a 16-foot, and you can take the seats and yoke and supports out of the 17, you can nestle them in together.
And then the pack boats, they
kind of fold down
like
into a massive bag.
Big bag of Meccano with some sort of skins and things. Yeah, that's pretty good. I'm thinking that Oliver might be Ollie from East of England Paddle Sports. So big shout out to them. They are fantastic. They've done a really good job of uniting a lot of people in the East of England that want to go paddling. Can anybody kayak on the river, or do you need special permission or licenses? Do you want to take that one?
Yeah, so you do need licenses, and you need to be on a navigable piece of river. So, for example, in Bedford, that starts in Kenston, and you can get licenses from the EA. I think they're about £35. Don't quote me on that. But you need them for a canoe, a paddleboard, a dinghy, anything that goes on the water. And of course, the EA help protect the environment, so they're all good for that anyway. But or you could join British Canoeing, and you get cover, which is for the UK, and it also covers like insurance and that kind of thing. So we generally say to join British Canoeing.
Yeah, and I think the other thing to talk about is the clear waters, clear access. So at the moment, I think we can only paddle 5% of the water in England and Wales. In Scotland, you can paddle further afield. So there is a debate going on. Certainly it's in the Welsh Assembly at the moment about giving people more access. There's a current thing going through or being discussed in Parliament about tightening the trespass laws. And all of these things may affect, and we should have a vested interest, or at least be informed about whether it affects our rights to swim, paddle, or do anything of a fun outdoors thing. So
I like your question, Peter. Who's the cook on the expeditions? It does tend to be me.
Not when you're not there.
No, when I'm not there. Richard's a really good cook, but because of all the other bits of admin that go with setting up camp every evening, I do tend to do a lot of the cooking, but whoever we're with always joins in, which is fantastic because, you know, people will put things together differently, and everyone's so obsessed with the food, you know, everyone's waiting around the fire, and you have to cook a lot of food. It's a lot of volume. Nothing worse than not having enough food on a paddling trip. And then, of course, you want to take your little tipple. So for us, it's whiskey and chocolates in the evening. But yeah, it's definitely me. And the evening around the campfire, food always tastes better in the campfire, on the campfire.
Around the campfire.
Around the campfire, yeah.
It's late.
On the
it's
campfire.
Late. And Peter has also asked, what is your favourite dish? So I'm a breakfast person, so I love homemade hash browns and poached eggs. We had those a lot on the Yukon. And I think I was so determined that I spent hours grating root veg trying to make it at 30 Mile River.
We do like a kind of a scrapple thing. So potatoes, onions, and a bit of bacon. Bacon's great because it lasts for ages. But yeah, so scrapple's really popular, and we put a fried egg on top of that, and it's just yum.
A couple of other questions coming in. How does the Yukon trip compare to something like a 5-day Ardèche trip? Well, 14 days on the river is one comparison. I think that because
a lot
less people, yeah, because you're quieter. Following in the gold rush history. For me, that and the wilderness is everything. Is it nice and warm? Sometimes is the answer.
What's the most interesting sup routes in Bedford? Well, we're blessed with a really stunning river where we are. So pretty much the whole length of the river is really beautiful. Some of our favourite spots are around Willington. So a nice little route is to get on at Bedford, paddle down to Willington, and you can come back. Some people do that sometimes. That's quite a long day, but that's really beautiful. And Great Barford's stunning as well.
Yeah, otters and all the rest.
Yeah, we have a lot of otters on this route, so we're really lucky.
Kevin, I'm going to reassure you, wherever possible, it's Scottish whiskey. And happy Burns
Happy
night.
Burns night, yeah.
Yeah.
If you saw our Facebook picture, we had how many whiskies last night?
You can't talk about it.
I think it was about 9. We were only having little, really tiny little bits, but yeah, that was nice.
There's a great message from Lauren Jarvis, lovely Lauren. We've known her for a long time. She was the editor of Nat Geo Kids, and she's a brilliant travel writer. She said, one of our Yukon paddles is on the wall behind us, Rich. And that is a great tradition, is having a paddle.
Buy a paddle and bring it home with you.
Yeah.
Diane's got a lovely paddle as well.
She has, yeah. And then interested in the cooking setup, any tips on stuff to buy for exped cooking? The reflector ovens are absolutely brilliant because they flat pack.
Yeah, they're fantastic. You can cook so many things in those. We've done bread, cakes, pizzas,
Brownies, chocolate brownies.
Brownies, they're always popular. But yeah, the reflector oven's fantastic. I think for cooking, it depends how many people. So our equipment tends to be quite big because we're usually cooking for quite a big crowd. But the Dutch oven, I'm sure you've heard of those. They are lovely to cook with. And the small, I think it's like a 4 or 8 pint is the smaller one. That's what we started with when it's just the two of us. That's what we have. Again, you can roast a chicken in it, you can bake bread in it, you can make stews, really good. And then we tend to have now a kettle that can just sit in the fire, but you can also have Kelly kettles as well.
Ever do anything on the Caledonian Canal? Yes, good to see it by the proper name, now called the Great Glen Canoe Trail. Yeah,
that
we've done
just before our wedding.
Yeah,
that was 2 weeks before our wedding. Everyone was going crazy because we weren't doing stuff for our wedding because that was really boring. So us and a load of friends went on a paddling trip along there. It was fantastic.
Yeah, we started near the Corrie Vrecken, so the big whirlpool, and paddled up onto Loch Linney and paddled all the way into Fort William before doing the Great Glen Canoe Trail, or Caledonian Canal as it's properly rightly known.
There's one about an otter. So some people live near our woodland in Willington, and they're saying that they haven't seen an otter yet. So we tend to see them quite late or quite early, and it's got to be quiet. Once everyone's out walking their dogs and what have you, you won't see them. But when we've been around the campfire in the evening, you might go down to the brook to, I don't know, wash your hands or something. That's when we tend to see them. Equally, a little tip is there's a family of otters in Bedford. So this time of year, you regularly see them, well, most evenings, to be honest, don't you? Outside the kayak club, weirdly. And if they're not there, they're on the lake at Longholm. So if you look on the local Facebook groups, lots of people post pictures of the family, and they've been doing that for a few years now.
Right, we got another question. Someone else saying they spent the Great Glen for their honeymoon too. I mean, I definitely recommend the Caledonian Canal, Great Glen, for people wanting to cut their teeth. Loch Ness can be a little bit lumpy, and as you get more experience, paddling the bits of river in between are fantastic. So the River Ness is a great bumpy wave train. Just be careful of the weirs. But, you know, and they're things we do on our Best of Scotland trip, where we coach people and lead people down them. What else have we got? What key things would you carry in your first aid kit?
We take expedition first aid kit, so our first aid kit is pretty large because we're responsible for you know, our customers. We tend to take, sounds really weird, but a lot of gaffer tape. I know we joked about it fixing boats, but actually if you need to fix a lot of things, and friends of ours have said the same, the most used thing in their paddling first aid kit is gaffer tape, because it really is fantastic at fixing things. If you need to make a splint or what have you, you can just use it for so many things. So definitely have that in there.
Vet wrap.
Vet wrap is fantastic. That's saved us on a few trips as well. So vet wrap, that we should probably call it by the human name. I don't know what you call it. We have it for our horses, but it's just a sticky bandage. It sticks back to itself. It's usually quite brightly coloured. It's fantastic if you've done anything to ankles or wrists, or you need to strap around a boot. We've done that before because it sticks to itself and it's pretty strong. So that's really good as well.
I mean, other sort of things we generally carry, things like an EpiPen for a group. We may have normally a couple of inhalers.
As well, tourniquets.
Wilderness first aid sort of trained. So when you do that course, that's, well, I'm quite squeamish because I've broken lots of things, but, you know, you end up having to sew things and, you know, look at all the rest of almost sort of being more of a medic, really.
Yeah, and these things do happen. I mean, we've had a broken leg. We've had degloved fingers. Sorry if people are squeamish. The degloved finger was actually on the trip that you just saw, the Ontario on Algonquin trip. And again, we managed to look after that so well that it was looking, you know, really healed up by the time he left. And so there's no reason for anything to get infected. You can keep on top of things if you have good first aid when you're in the wilderness.
How will I know when it's safe to go? That's a really good thing. I have said to Peter from Paddler magazine, fantastic resource. I think if you're a member of British Canoeing, then you do get a copy of that because it has the canoe focus bit in it. But I have said to him about writing a kind of trip planning bit, which will include, you know, how do I judge whether to go or don't go? And one example I can give you is when we did the 1,000-mile sea kayak, we had done a lot of training and a lot of paddling, but we met someone who'd had one lesson, and his rule of thumb was if he could see white caps, he wouldn't paddle. And I think there's a sort of lesson in there about only, you know, looking and knowing what you're paddling and knowing that you've got the skills to do that. And that comes with the caveat of obviously the conditions change, or you come around the corner and there's a waterfall. So, you know, you do need to look at it. But at the most basic level of flat water, you know, then it's have a look at whether it's in flood, understand on the map. I think that was the other question you asked about. What are the good mapping systems? I mean, the Ordnance Survey, digital and paper maps are, you know, an excellent resource. I think the digital's 20 quid a year or something, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you can have that to your phone. I prefer paper, but there you go. I'm old. Yeah, there we go. So we've got Go Paddling, and that's a good point. The Go Paddling stuff. The British Canoeing has absolutely revolutionised their digital offer, both in terms of online training and paddling points and all the rest of it. So I would, you know, getting their license is just good value for money because it gives you access to being part of a really big community. I think since lockdown 1, it's gone from 42 to 69,000 members, which is great because it gives paddling a voice, and that's really important for all of us. The final thing, I think I've got the last kind of question. Preferred outfitter for Tomogamy. As you arrive in Tomogamy town, there's a really lovely, and I think they are called Tomogamy Outfitters, and they were just really decent, weren't they?
just off the dock. Really lovely guy. Him and his wife have set it up, and their kit was really good as well.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much. Just to repeat, the 9th of February will be Helen. She is absolutely a ball of energy, a fantastic BBC commentator and, you know, kayaking legend. So I'd absolutely recommend you join us for that. And we'd like to thank you again for joining us, and would ask if you've got a moment to write us a nice Google review. That helps us. But shamelessly plugging, yes.
But thank you so much for joining us. And if you do have any questions and something pops up later on or tomorrow or whenever, do get in contact with us and ask us. We are more than happy to give advice. So yeah, just ping us an email or find us on Facebook, and we'll try and help you out as best we can.
One other thing just to say, sorry, I forgot, was we are building a huge amount of the content that we've written for magazines over the last 10 years into a kind of library of information. So if you're interested in paddling, watch this space with the website, register for the newsletters, because we've got about 100 articles that are going on there. So some of the questions you've been asking.
And tips and what have you. So hopefully it'll be a useful resource for you guys.
Right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. We hope to see you in a couple of weeks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.